In part 11 of the History of Experience, we deal with the reflections of the self. And the first who is responsible for the reflection of the self is Zarathustra, so this will be our first part. But before I go to Zarathustra, I get back once again to my own experience of self-awareness from the Stargazer episode, because this kind of self-awareness, this shift to self-awareness, is the same kind of experience that is responsible for Zarathustra's new approach to experience as well. So we all remember that in that very moment when I was looking at the stars, out of a sudden I returned to myself and looked inwardly. So what I did is I started a process of self-reflection. This kind of self-awareness is part of that. And self-reflection can be subdivided into two major aspects. The first is self-awareness or introspection, and the second is that you realize you are the origin of deeds, of action as well. So we call that self-agency. This is something we don't have in cosmological myth. Humans are always sort of victims. They receive knowledge. They don't create it. No cosmological myth has ever been written in the name of an author. The one who recites it is only a priest reciting something that has been there forever. But there are two exceptions to the rules. One is an Akkadian priestess, the daughter of King Sargon, by the name of Hedwana. She lived from 2285 to 2250 before Christ. Her father asked her to write a couple of religious poetry, of poems, that were meant to represent both the Akkadian and the Sumerian tradition, unite them into one big canon that everybody could follow. And when she summarized her results in the end, she talks to her father and says to him, "Father, this I have done, and I'm the author of this text." So a woman is the first known author in the history of human literature. The next person that we know and that names himself within a text is King Hammurabi, the famous protagonist, king of Babylonia, who installed the first written law of human history that has survived in stone. And he says to his people, "I have done this," but he is still shy about being the originator of the text. The text comes from the God, but he's the one who sets up the plates with the written laws. So we always have a sequence in the experiential turns that run through four identical stages. You always start with some isolated pioneers who have an idea that there's something new coming, a new experiential dimension is being detected. I call this the incubation. Then in the next step, someone will realize that something new has really come alive, has appeared, and can be described. So it will become articulated. What is new here? Then we need an easy to follow method, instructions for all, so that everybody can adopt the new kind of experience. And for this kind of methods to survive, we need an institution who is in charge with keeping to these rules. Something that we simply call a school or a church or a priesthood or whatever else. And one of the first who succeeded to establish this kind of methodical practice and insight of self-reflection was the Iranian prophet Zoroaster, or Zarathustra as he is called sometimes. He lived somewhere in the second half of the century, 1500 to 1100 before Christ. The exact dates are unknown because there are no datable records out of that period. And we do not even have a picture of that prophet, only a symbol that represents him. You find it very often depicted in this way, as a two-winged person who holds a ring in his hand, and he is the representative of Zarathustra. The symbol is called the Firavarti or Faravahar in Persian. Zarathustra is the first person that we call a prophet who talks directly to his God. His partner is Ahura Mazda, the Lord of Wisdom, and Zarathustra himself in his text, in his poetry, reports the first encounter with his God. The God approaches him at a certain occasion and asks him, "Who art thou? Who are you? Whose art thou? On which side are you on?" And then Zarathustra replies to that approach and talks to him. This is something that never happens in cosmological mythology. And he says, and names himself in his answer and says, "First of all, I am Zarathustra." And then he takes sides in the next step and say, "I support, I praise, and extol thee, O wise one." So what has happened here is a decision to present himself as a person and to take sides. This becomes an integral part of this relatively new kind of religion as compared to cosmological myths, who have out of a sudden the self-awareness that people play a role, that they have to make a decision and they have a free will to be either on the right side or on the wrong side. So the Mazda Yasna, the wisdom teaching, it's a literal translation, is always concerned with the decision between truth and lie, between order and disorder. And since that is an ongoing decision-making process, everybody has to do that day out and day after, day out and day in. And that's why Zarathustra designed a certain method of self-reflection that everybody can easily follow. And so the Zarathustrians, his people, have always to control themselves by introspection, and they have to reflect themselves according to a very simple rule consisting of 3 commands. Control your thoughts, your words, and your deeds. And ask yourself, do you have good thoughts? Do you speak good words? Do you do good deeds? And that's something everybody has to do throughout the day and throughout his life. So the method becomes an integral part of that new kind of society. And we will take a look at that new kind of society in our next part, part 12, that deals with prophets and empires. Thank you for this time.